Three's the Charm by MissCHSparkles. Chapter 6. Harry could not stop grinning as he left the shop with Hedwig safely placed in her cage. He also had enough supplies to last him a month, as well as a book on looking after owls. It was still hard to believe he had his beloved pet back, but he certainly did, and she looked great. He'd make sure no one harmed her this time, and she would live a great, long life. "We can go and look at wands next, Harry," Hagrid was now saying, as Harry nodded. A sudden thought struck him. Ron would be coming to school with his brother Charlie's old wand, one which never worked very well for him. It had been one of the reasons he hadn't done as well in his first and second years, because that wand was old and hadn't chosen him. Of course, being broken hadn't helped either, but Harry hoped they could avoid that this time around. But how to get Ron a wand? He couldn't very well buy it himself for Ron. He and Ron weren't friends yet, so he couldn't hardly send money without questions being raised. Ron would need a decent wand this time around, but getting it could prove tricky. Somehow, he'd had to get the money to Ron so it could be spent on a wand. Remembering how long it had taken to get a wand the last time around, he certainly had enough time to think up a solution. The shop's bell tinkled as they entered the gloomy establishment, but Hagrid's bolt blocked the sunlight so that the place appeared even darker. Harry felt nervous. Ollivander had always creeped him out a bit. He just seemed a little too fascinated by Voldemort's power. The weirdest thing about this was that he had no intention of even joining a wizard like Voldemort voluntarily, or even try to grab power for himself. He just seemed so enthralled by the magic which could be wielded from a wand, no matter who was doing the wielding. Somehow, Harry doubted he'd ever really feel comfortable in the man's presence, but at least he knew the man would never actually side with any dark wizards. "Good afternoon," came Mr. Ollivander's voice, and Harry looked up from his musing to see the wandmaker himself. "I thought I might be seeing you today, Mr. Potter," Ollivander stated, before telling Harry about his parents' wands, and which subject those wands favoured. It was interesting hearing about his parents' wands again, and Harry listened attentively, until the old wizard pointed out his scar. "Of course, I sold the wand that did it," Ollivander said quietly. "Well, if I'd known what that wand was going into the world to do." Harry tried not to sigh. It had been this that had really creeped him out. Thankfully, Ollivander only said a couple more things about that wand, before questioning Hagrid on his own. This made Harry wonder. When they proved Hagrid's innocence, would it be possible for him to legally carry a wand again? Hagrid seemed to manage fine without one, and only occasionally using his umbrella, but surely, by rights, he should have the option of a wand. Well, it was something else to discuss with his friends, and maybe Hagrid, once his innocence was proven. "What is your wand hand?" Mr. Ollivander suddenly asked. My right hand?" Harry tried, and stood still as a tape measure started on him. He still didn't know what this had to do with getting a wand. After all, he wouldn't know which wand was suitable until he got it in his hand. Maybe it was a stalling tactic so Ollivander could glean more from his customer? Possibly something about their height and stature to help decide which wands to start with. For example, Hagrid needed a pretty thick wand, so being measured maybe did help. Finally, Ollivander finished messing around with the tape and darted to his shelves of boxes. Eagerly he yanked down and placed them on the counter before selecting a dusty box. Carefully, he took a wand out and presented it to Harry, who ruefully took it. This was definitely not his wand, and he'd barely had a chance to wave it before it was yanked away. As he tried wand after wand, he thought about Ron. How could his friend plausibly get his hands on some gold? He remembered that Ron had got his good wand after Mr. Weasley won a competition before their third year. Would something similar work? But how could he pass himself off as someone in charge of a competition? Someone like Percy might question. Harry continued racking his brains as more and more wands piled up. And then suddenly, a brainwave hit him. Ron lived very near a Muggle village. What if he went in there one day and just offhandedly entered something? And then he received the prize money, which, conveniently, happened to be enough for a wand. It would need to be Muggle money, of course, but Mr. and Mrs. Weasley could easily exchange it for galleons. So that meant after he had gotten his wand, he needed to exchange some of his own galleons into Muggle money. It would actually probably be a good idea to have some spare Muggle money. You never know what might happen.
Yes, why not? Unusual combination. Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple.
Harry suddenly paid attention as he realised that Ollivander had finally come to his wand. Eagerly he took it and breathed in relief as a familiar feeling of warmth shot up his arm. With a wave he created a shower of gold and red sparks which appeared to sizzle and dazzle with excitement.
Oh, yes!
Ollivander exclaimed, clapping his hand in delight.
Yes, indeed. Oh, how very good. Well, well, well. How curious. How very curious.
Harry sighed before asking, "What's curious?" Ollivander duly told him, and Harry had to force himself to act shocked and scared. But honestly, after last year, he really couldn't care less that his wand shared a core with Voldemort. Still, he listened attentively to what the elderly man said before paying for his wand and leaving. "Hagrid," he asked as the door shut behind them, "can we go back to Gringotts? I want to get some Muggle money."
Muggle money?
Hagrid repeated with a furrowed brow. "Just in case," Harry explained quickly. "And maybe we could visit the sweet shop next?"
This made Hagrid crack a smile. "Sure, Harry, we can do that. And after, we'd better head to the train station. You've got a train to catch home."
"Thanks, Hagrid," Harry said very gratefully. They successfully managed to change some of his money into Muggle currency before heading back into the afternoon sun. Then they headed to Caramella Confectionery so Harry could stock up. He loved it. There was so much to choose from, including chocolate frogs, Bertie Bott's every flavour beans, sugar quills, ice mice, fireballs, and so many more. He bought as much as he could carry. He needed a bit of sugar during his long summer.
"Think that'll do ya,
Harry?" Hagrid teased as they made their way to Diagon Alley. "I think so," Harry chuckled in response as they stepped out into Muggle world. Ron's POV. Ron stared out of the window of his bedroom, gazing at the starry sky. Today had been a bit of a difficult day. Not the least because everyone was a little awkward after his nightmare. Considering the vivid detail he had given, it wasn't surprising that everyone was being careful with him. He had had a lot of trouble getting to sleep until his mother slipped something into his drink. He woke up very late and back in his bed with his father reading in a chair nearby. Ron didn't remember falling asleep, and he knew he had been carried up to his room. For a moment, he just lay there, as he allowed the memories of Fred alive to wash over him. Finally, he made his presence known to his dad, who smiled and put his book down.
"How are you doing, Ron?"
"Fine," Ron said, putting himself into a sitting position. "What time is it?"
"Nearly lunchtime," his dad said, quickly checking his watch. "You've slept the morning away, son."
Ron blinked. It was rare he ever did that. And he could feel the stirrings of hunger starting to gnaw at his insides, although it would normally be a lot more obvious. He really had been badly affected by Fred's, well, rebirth. The boy rubbed his stomach for a moment, before saying slowly, "Anything good for lunch?"
"I believe your mother's doing macaroni and garlic bread," his father said with a smile, "and she might even be adding a little crispy bacon."
Ron grinned. He loved having bacon with his cheese and macaroni. He knew his mother was probably adding it for his benefit, and the thought made him smile even more. After nearly 6 months of scavenging for food, he'd be glad to eat properly again. With a slight wince, he remembered how much he had complained about the lack of food as Harry and Hermione suffered. Harry had often gone with barely any food, and he had moaned about missing a few meals. He swore that this time round, he'd do even better, even if that meant learning to cook and surviving in the wild. Frankly, it was probably a good idea anyway, as you truly never knew when you might need those skills. If he and Harry really did become Aurors, it'd probably help him track down Death Eaters. "Sounds great," he said to his dad, who nodded.
"I'm looking forward to it myself."
His dad then paused before asking,
"Are you feeling better, Ron? I know it must have been horrible, but you do know it was just a dream?"
"Yeah," Ron said quietly. It really got to me."
"I know, and I understand," Arthur said seriously. "It's hard to lose your brother. It feels like a part of you has been ripped away."
Ron suddenly remembered that his dad had lost a brother, his namesake, Bilious. As for his mum, she had lost her twin brothers, Fabian and Gideon. Unknowingly, they really did know what he had gone through. To his dad, he said, "That's how it felt in my dream." The last part he added as an afterthought, but his dad didn't notice. Arthur nodded before saying,
"Just remember that your brother is alive and well, and soon you'll forget all about your dream."
"And it won't take long for Fred to take the mickey," Ron said with a long-suffering sigh.
"Oh, no, he won't," Arthur said firmly. "Your mother has made it very clear about what will happen if they make fun of you. But I don't think they will. You shocked even the twins by how much you care."
Ron flushed at this and fiddled with a tiny hole in his blanket. His father smiled and got to his feet, coming closer to the bed. Lightly laying a hand on Ron's back and rubbing it, he said,
"Why don't you get dressed, Ron? Then you should come down for lunch. Or should I say, brunch?"
This made Ron grin ever so slightly, and he nodded. As long as his twin brothers didn't hassle him and Percy didn't lecture, then this should be a pretty good brunch. And it had been a good one. The familiar home cooking had cheered him up to no end. The twins had decided to pretend the whole incident hadn't happened, and just laughed and joked as usual. They did keep sending him odd looks, but seemed to think acting normally was the best policy. Ginny was more affectionate than normal. She was determined to cheer him up. Percy kept making awkward conversation, but he was making an effort to engage with him. Afterwards, they'd spent a fairly normal day, including playing Quidditch, cleaning up their rooms, denoming the garden, racing over the meadow, and various other things. Ron did his best to focus in on enjoying himself, and not about the dark 7th year he had spent. But he couldn't stop himself from acting anxious. He was on fire to hear from Harry and Hermione. Well, just Harry realistically, as Hermione didn't have an owl, and he didn't have a telephone. He smiled. He finally learned how to say that word. Hermione nagging him about it did that. He dearly wished he could see her, but it wouldn't be able to do that for a whole month. Then again, they all needed a break. This year and the last had been so intense. Once they all met up again, they'd be fresh and new and ready to take on the new school year. "Just a month," Ron murmured to himself, ignoring Scabbers, who was snoozing on a shelf. He'd been avoiding the rat all day. He could barely look at him. Just the fact he had a mass murderer just a few feet away was mind-boggling. And that wasn't even the weirdest thing that had ever happened to him. He had decided that it would be best to spend as little time with the rat as possible, and could just pretend he was bored with his hand-me-down pet that didn't actually do anything. It was doubtful this would worry Wormtail. As long as he was fed and watered, he would just carry on snoozing. He stared out the window again. The moon was full. Remus Lupin would be transformed, and probably locked up somewhere. Ron hoped he was okay, but knew the werewolf was living a hard life right now. Hopefully they could do something to help him. Hopefully Lupin would know his son. Ron groaned. There was a lot of pressure on them to ensure good people like Lupin didn't die. Were they up for it? He wasn't sure, but knew they would give it their all anyway. Just as he was about to close the window against the chill wind blowing, he suddenly spied a white dot in the distance. As he watched, it grew bigger until Ron recognized the outline of an owl, and by the looks of it, it was a white owl. His heart gave a little jolt. Was that Hedwig? But she was dead. Idiot, she'll be alive in this time. But was it really her? Had Harry managed to buy her and send a letter to Ron? Well, he'd know soon enough. The owl was flying right for his bedroom. Once she was close enough, Ron knew it was Hedwig, and he joyfully called out her name. Hedwig! Immediately she swooped down over to him, and he opened the window wide enough that she could fly inside safely. She fluttered around the room once, completely ignoring Scabbers, who briefly twitched before relaxing as he saw she was just a post owl. She landed on an old clothes horse which was devoid of clothing and stuck out her leg. He dutifully took the offered letter with his name on it. He briefly noticed another letter, but was more interested in his own. He grinned as he opened the letter, which was a lot thicker than it should be. To his surprise, as well as a letter, there was a wad of Muggle money. He stared at it for a moment before putting it aside and sitting back on his bed to read. Dear Ron, if you're reading this, then you've recognised Hedwig, and she has delivered this letter to you. I wasn't sure if you or Hermione had gone back with me, but I figured you had. There's another letter for Hermione, and once Hedwig's had a rest, that's where she's going. While she's resting, if you want to send a letter to me or Hermione, you can do that. Ron smiled. He definitely wanted to send a letter to both of his friends. I wish I could see both of you, but that obviously isn't possible. The Dursleys wouldn't be happy if I just disappeared and then came back. They're unhappy enough as it is. Don't worry, nothing's happened. I'm just getting a lot of dirty looks. Ron well understood that, and was glad Harry was doing okay. At least contact had been made. That took one weight off his shoulders. He was pretty sure if both he and Harry were back in time, Hermione would be as well. Of course, he'd have to wait to confirm this. Hedwig would return to Harry after visiting Hermione, before then coming back to him. I'm really looking forward to seeing you again, Ron. Being back here, it's all come flooding back. What life was like before I knew what I was. This will probably be difficult, and at times annoying, but I really think we can all make a difference this time. But if for any reason you wanted to quit, I'd more than understand. Idiot, Ron muttered, shaking his head. When was Harry going to get it through his thick head that they were in this together? With a pang, he remembered the 2 times he and Harry had fought and briefly parted ways. He deeply regretted it, and his only excuse was that so much crap had been going on at both of those times. It wasn't much of an excuse, but he knew wallowing in guilt wasn't the answer. This time, he had a chance to do everything so much better. He wouldn't be a selfish prat. After all, he'd certainly done a few things his brothers and little sister hadn't. Anyway, if you're still in, then great. You're probably wondering about the Muggle money. Well, it's to help you get a wand. Ron stared. He'd completely forgotten about that. He was going to go to school with Charlie's old wand, but it seemed Harry had a plan to get him his real wand. Although he really had no idea how he was going to do that with Muggle money. Well, I would send you galleons, but your parents would obviously wonder where you got them. And since you can't tell them about me, this is the next best thing. My idea is that you go into the Muggle village and spend a little time there. Then, in a few days' time, you go back there. And then you go back to the Burrow with the news you won a competition. You can say you found a 50-pence piece that first time you were there and just entered for the hell of it.
A grin slowly spread across his face as he read the last part, dimly remembering what a 50-pence piece was from Harry's first Christmas. He trembled slightly. Could he really get his own wand 2 years earlier? His own wand. Let's see Malfoy sneer at him now.
There is more than enough for a wand, and you should have a little left over, once you've exchanged the money for galleons.
Ron, I know things can be awkward when it comes to money, and that normally you'd rather I didn't give you an amount like this. But I'm sure this is important. You have to have your own wand. We can't wait 2 years. Make sure you ask for a new wand. This is the most important bit of our Hogwarts stuff. Now Ron smiled wryly. He doubted his parents would deny him his own wand after that nightmare. And Harry was right. Normally he would feel pretty weird about being given money. Harry was so generous, and Ron did know this was because he had grown up with no friends or money and wanted to look after his friends. But Ron couldn't help but be ashamed any time Harry brought him something, because he wished he could return the favour. Sure, he could buy a round of butterbeers and some sweets, but he couldn't really treat them. And he so wanted to. He wanted to be the one to buy large ice creams or magical binoculars. One reason he was looking forward to the end of school was because he could get a job and start earning the money he could use to spend on his friends. He knew how Harry must have felt before his first year. But in this case, he didn't feel as bad as he normally did. He really wanted that wand. And Harry was right. What good would he be if he didn't have a proper wand? If they were going to take on Voldemort, they all had to have a decent wand. Besides, he had to admit the idea of a little extra gold was very attractive. Someday he could pay Harry back. But for now, he'd be the best friend he could possibly be. Was there any little way he could say thank you? Well, Harry did love real food, proper home cooking. When they first met, Harry had absolutely nothing to eat during the long train journey to Hogwarts. He'd been forced to fill up from the sweet trolley. Not that that hadn't been fun, but it was still nice to have a little lunch prepared for you. His mum was always so busy she could sometimes give the wrong sandwiches, but he still appreciated it. What if he learned to cook a little, and maybe managed to make something for him, Harry, and Hermione? They could still treat themselves, but it would show he was really trying to make an effort. And who knows, he might even enjoy it, especially if he'd get to eat the results. Although he had no idea if he'd even be any good at cooking, he had enjoyed making biscuits with his mum when he was younger. And unlike potion making, he didn't have to worry about adding certain ingredients in exactly the right order or worrying about poisoning. Anyway, assuming your family accepts how you got the money, you should have a new wand within a week or so. There's lots of ground we'll need to cover once we meet up. Maybe you could write a list of some of the issues we need to take care of. I think it'll make us more organised, and it'll score more points with Hermione. You know she'll like that. This made Ron laugh. She could probably write a whole book on things they needed to do. It did sound like a good idea. He'd rather they had a proper plan. Sure, most of their plans went awry, but that didn't mean good preparation wasn't essential. He rather enjoyed making up plans and trying to plan ahead. It was a lot like chess. Noticing that not much more of the letter was left, he focused on it again. Not much else to really say. My trip to Diagon Alley went well. It actually went even better than last time. It's weird, but there's so many things I want to write, but at the same time, I've got no idea what else to put. Since we've got a month left, I think I'd rather hold back a bit, so that I've got something to write to you with. Although I will say I'm going to make an effort with my cousin Dudley. You are? Ron asked in mild surprise. Remember what I told you the last time I saw him? Well, he made an effort to reach out to me, and I really appreciated it, but I think too much had happened between us. I think we would have kept touch a little, at least sent each other birthday and Christmas cards,
Maybe tell each other when we got married, had kids, stuff like that. But I don't think it would have been much more than that. I want to have a go at making something more than that. And who knows? Maybe we could even be friends someday. Ron stared at this before muttering, "You're crazy, mate." Although, if anyone could win round that overgrown whale, it would be Harry. And if he wanted to have a go, and then good luck to him. As long as he didn't get hurt, Ron wasn't bothered if Harry wanted to try to establish a relationship with his cousin. Anyway, I've just remembered. You need to hang fire with Scabbers/Wormtail. As horrible as it is, I can't think of any logical way you could show everyone who he really is. But don't worry. Once we're together, we'll think of something. You won't have to put up with him long. I know it's a lot to ask, but we don't want anyone finding out what we know. We all know what everyone thinks of crazy people. Too right, Ron thought to himself. But we will get rid of him somehow. We just need a careful plan. Don't forget to buy yourself a nice new wand, and I'll see you in a month. Have a good summer, Harry. Ron smiled. After the uneasy day, having a letter from Harry made him feel a lot better. It was like things were coming back together. This was very familiar territory for him. Carefully, he folded up the letter and placed it back in its envelope, along with the Muggle money. He'd put this in a safe place. Make sure no one found it, especially the twins. Best to go to the village as soon as possible. Then he could produce the money and not have to worry about it. He cast one last look at Scabbers, the rat appearing to be asleep. He had to be careful around him. If that rat got the slightest hint they were onto him. "You okay, Hedwig?" he asked the snowy owl, who rustled her feathers importantly, indicating she was just fine. He smiled, lightly stroking her, and wishing he had Pig. Oh well, maybe somehow they'd find each other. You just never know. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this one. Hope my voice was okay. I've been recovering from a terrible sickness. It's really awful. There's a nasty virus going around where I am, and I caught it big time. I was having a horrible cold, and my brother had this virus. And when I was recovering from the cold, because my immune system was down, I caught a full blast of it. I was in bed in my pyjamas, unable to breathe without it being a manual effort, for a whole flippin' week. It was horrible. Coughing, sneezing, retching, sweating like a pig. It was horrid. Anyway, I do like this chapter. And I love the idea that Ron's a bit bitter about money, not just because of his family, but also because he wants to be the one to treat his friends. And then noticing that Harry likes home-cooked food, and deciding he wants to try to learn how to cook. Why does that fit Ron so beautifully? One reason I love this fic so much is that they get Ron's character dead on. So many fics get him as the jealous best friend who's a bit rowdy and likes his food and gets jealous over Hermione. No, Ron is loyal to his core and struggles with insecurity. This portrays him perfectly, especially when he's had time to mature. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified for whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.